4. Let's talk about the very first reason avoidants often step back from love and instead extend the hand of friendship: the fear of vulnerability. At its core, 4. Vulnerability is the willingness to be seen, to be known, to open yourself up without armor. It's the moment where you say, "This is who I am," 4. With all the cracks, all the insecurities, all the unpolished pieces. And while many of us crave that kind of connection, for someone with avoidant tendencies, 4. That level of exposure feels like standing at the edge of a cliff without a parachute. Why? Because vulnerability implies risk. When you let someone get close enough to see the real you, you give them the power to hurt you. You give them access not just to your strengths, 4, but also to your soft spots, the places where rejection or abandonment would sting the most. For avoidance, love doesn't feel like warmth, it feels like danger. 4. They have learned, often early in life, that closeness equals pain. Maybe a caregiver wasn't consistently available. Maybe their needs were dismissed, minimized, 4, or met with coldness. Over time, they internalize the belief that it's safer to shut down than to open up. Now, 4. Friendship doesn't trigger that same alarm system. Friendship is connection with a certain distance. It's companionship without the demand for total surrender. 4. It allows an avoidant person to engage, to laugh, to share pieces of themselves, without having to risk their entire heart. In friendship, vulnerability is optional. 4. In love, it's required. And so when faced with the choice, many avoidants unconsciously choose the safer path. They offer friendship as a shield, a way of saying, 4. I want you in my life, but not so close that you can undo me. Think about the psychology of that. On the surface, it can look cold, detached, even selfish. 4. But underneath, it's not about a lack of care. It's about survival. Vulnerability threatens the very system avoidants built to protect themselves. 4. And that system is powerful. It tells them, if you stay guarded, you'll never be betrayed. If you never lean too far in, 4, you'll never fall. It's an illusion of safety, but an illusion they cling to because the alternative, true intimacy, feels unbearable. 4. But here's the paradox: vulnerability is not weakness. Vulnerability is the birthplace of love, of trust, of authentic connection. 4. It's where intimacy actually begins. Without it, relationships stay on the surface, safe but shallow. 4. Avoidants think they are protecting themselves by offering friendship instead of love. But in reality, 4. They're protecting themselves from the very thing their soul is craving: deep, transformative connection. And this is why, 4. If you're on the other side of that dynamic, if you've ever been loved by an avoidant or wanted love from one, you feel that sense of frustration, of being kept at arm's length. It's not that they don't feel, 4. It's that feeling fully would mean exposing themselves to the risk of being hurt the way they once were. Their avoidance isn't a lack of emotion, 4. It's a fear of being undone by emotion. The challenge, then, isn't to judge avoidance or to force them into opening up. It's to understand the roots of that fear. 4. Because fear of vulnerability doesn't just exist in avoidance. If we're honest, it exists in all of us. We all have walls, we all have protective strategies, for we all wrestle with the instinct to control how much of ourselves we let the world see. Avoidants just live at the extreme end of that spectrum. And here's the truth: the walls we build to keep ourselves safe are the same walls that keep us lonely. Avoidants may choose friendship instead of love because it feels safer, but safety without intimacy is a half-lived life. 4. The very thing they're running from is the key to the connection they hunger for. Vulnerability may feel like a cliff, but it is actually a bridge. 4. And when they finally realize that, love stops being a threat and starts becoming the freedom it was always meant to be. The choice is simple, but not easy. 4. Live, armored, and safe, or open and alive. If vulnerability is the cliff that avoidants fear standing on, then control is the parachute they believe will save them. 4. Control is the silent force driving so much of their behavior, because love by its very nature is unpredictable. Love doesn't follow a script. 4. It doesn't come with guarantees. It doesn't bend itself to the neat lines of order. Love is messy, alive, dynamic. It asks us to surrender. 4. And for someone with avoidant tendencies, surrender feels like stepping straight into chaos. Think about it. 4. Love requires you to let go of control over how you're perceived, how your partner responds, and even how you feel in the moment. For you can't control when passion flares, when jealousy strikes, or when deep longing arises. You can't control if the other person pulls closer or drifts away. For love is a dance where no one truly leads all the time, and that unpredictability can be exhilarating for some, but terrifying for others. Friendship, 4, on the other hand, feels more manageable. It comes with a framework of expectations that's looser, less demanding, and safer. 4. You can show up for a friend without giving up your independence. You can be there without the same intensity of emotional investment. 4. You can walk away for a while without the panic of abandonment crashing down. 4. Friendship is a zone where avoidance can hold on to control while still tasting connection. It's not the feast of intimacy. 4. But it's enough of a snack to keep loneliness from swallowing them whole. But here's the deeper layer. 4. The need for control is almost always born from a past where someone felt powerless. Maybe they grew up in a home where love was conditional. 4. Where affection came with strings attached, or where chaos was the daily rhythm. In those early moments, a child doesn't think, this environment is unstable. They think, I must make myself invulnerable. Control becomes the strategy. If I control my emotions, 4. No one can use them against me. If I control my needs, no one can neglect them. If I control the level of closeness, no one can abandon me. 4. It's brilliant as a survival mechanism, but it's disastrous when applied to adult love. Because here's the truth, you can't control love without killing it. For love only breathes in freedom. Love only thrives when both people are willing to loosen their grip and trust the unknown. 4. And this is why avoidants so often sabotage their own relationships. They crave connection, but when it starts to get too close, 4. When the unpredictable current of love starts pulling them in deeper, they reach for control. They withdraw, they shut down, they create distance. In doing so, 4. They trade passion for predictability, depth for safety, and intimacy for independence. But that trade-off comes at a cost. Control may keep their world orderly, but it also keeps their heart confined. They live in a prison disguised as freedom. They think they're maintaining independence. 4. But what they're really doing is isolating themselves from the very intimacy that makes life meaningful. Now, let's flip the lens for a moment. 4. This need for control isn't just about avoidance, it's about us all. We all wrestle with the urge to control outcomes, to protect ourselves from the unknown. 4. How many times have you pulled back from love, from risk, from opportunity, just because the outcome wasn't guaranteed? That's the same psychology at work. 4. Avoidants simply take it to an extreme. But the principle applies universally when we choose control over connection. 4. We shrink the possibility of what life could give us. The irony is, the more we try to control, the less control we actually have. In relationships, 4. Control doesn't create security, it erodes it. The partner feels the withdrawal, the distance, the resistance. 4. And they respond with either frustration or detachment. 4. And so the very thing the avoidant fears most, losing the relationship, becomes the reality created by their own need for control. What's the way out? 4. It's the courage to surrender, to let go of the illusion that safety can be found in control. Real safety comes from trust, not from micromanaging closeness. 4. Trust in yourself, trust in the other person, trust in the process of love itself. Because at the end of the day, love is not something you can cage, or it's not something you can regulate like a thermostat. Love is alive. It moves, it breathes, it surprises you. And the moment you try to strangle it with control, it slips right through your fingers. The paradox is simple. The only way to truly feel secure in love is to release control and let yourself be carried by it. If vulnerability is the cliff and control is the parachute, then friendship for the avoidant becomes the landing zone. The place where they believe they can touch the ground without ever risking the free fall of love. 4. It's the illusion of connection without the full weight of risk. And at first glance, it almost works. Friendship provides warmth, laughter, shared experiences. 4. And even a sense of belonging. It scratches the itch of human connection, but it doesn't demand the same surrender that romantic love requires. But here's the catch. What looks like connection on the outside often functions as a mask on the inside. For avoidance, friendship can become a substitute for intimacy, a middle ground where they can say, see, I'm not closed off. I care, I show up. Yet underneath, 4. What they're really doing is managing how close someone can get. It's a brilliant strategy because it gives them the benefits of companionship without confronting the terror of exposure. But it's still a strategy. It's not true openness. Think of it like this: friendship is the stage they're willing to perform on, for while love is the backstage they keep locked. You might hear the music, see the smiles, share the jokes, but the deeper reality, the raw fears, for the unspoken longings, the hidden vulnerabilities, remain sealed away. Friendship allows them to stay in control of the script. Love, by contrast, rips up the script and forces them to improvise with their whole heart exposed. That's why they avoid it. Now, On a psychological level, this makes perfect sense. For human beings are wired to avoid pain. If love has historically been linked to wounds, abandonment, betrayal, or neglect, then the nervous system treats intimacy like a fire to be avoided. Offering friendship becomes the compromise. It's not isolation, but it's not exposure either. It's a careful negotiation. I'll let you in, but only this far. Here's where it gets fascinating. Even though friendship feels safer, the avoidant still hungers for something deeper. You can see it in the way they hover close but then pull back. The way they light up when someone reaches them but then quickly retreat. There's a push and pull inside them. Because the human heart doesn't settle for illusions forever. At some point, companionship without intimacy feels hollow. The soul knows the difference between real closeness and managed distance. And this isn't just about avoidance. It's about all of us. Haven't you ever settled for the appearance of connection instead of its reality? Maybe you kept things surface level in your relationships because diving deeper felt too risky. Maybe you told yourself that casual, comfortable connections were enough, when deep down you craved the fire of real intimacy. We all have that instinct to protect ourselves with illusions. Avoidants just make that illusion into their entire operating system. But here's the painful paradox: illusions don't feed us. They keep us alive, but they don't let us thrive. Friendship in this context is like eating empty calories. It fills the space, but it doesn't nourish the soul. Love is the true nourishment. Love is the only thing that satisfies the hunger for real belonging. But to taste it, you have to be willing to risk, to let go, to allow yourself to be truly seen. So when avoidants offer friendship instead of love, it's not that they don't care. It's that they are choosing the illusion of safety over the reality of risk. They're clinging to a compromise that feels protective in the moment, but leaves them unfulfilled in the long run. The tragedy is that by avoiding risk, they also avoid the very experience that could transform them. And that's the lesson for all of us. You cannot find freedom in illusions. You cannot trick your heart into believing it's satisfied with half measures. True connection requires full presence. It requires stepping into love, not circling it from a safe distance. The illusion of connection may comfort you for a while, but only the courage of true intimacy will set you free. Love is not just an emotion, it's a trigger. For the avoidant, falling in love doesn't simply mean stepping into closeness, it means stepping back into the past. Because love, unlike friendship, has a way of reaching straight into the deepest layers of the psyche, where the oldest wounds still live. That's why avoidants often pull away when love begins to bloom. It isn't because they don't feel, it's because what they feel awakens pain they thought they had buried. When someone starts to love them, really love them. It stirs memories of being let down when they needed someone most. Maybe it was a parent who was physically there but emotionally unavailable. Maybe it was moments of rejection, shaming, or neglect that taught them intimacy is dangerous. Those early experiences created an equation in their nervous system. Closeness equals danger, attachment equals pain. So when romance enters the picture, the body doesn't celebrate, it braces for impact. Friendship doesn't carry that same weight. Friendship feels lighter, less loaded with expectation. A friend can walk away, and yes, it might hurt, but it doesn't usually touch the primal fear of abandonment that love does. Love, by contrast, flips all the switches at once. It demands trust. It awakens longing. It carries the implicit threat of loss. For the avoidant, that's not just uncomfortable, it's terrifying. Their entire system screams, don't go there. It's not safe. This is why you see the cycle so often. The relationship starts well, intimacy builds, everything feels promising. And then suddenly, the avoidant begins to retreat. They don't always know why. Sometimes they'll rationalize it as needing space, or claim the feelings aren't mutual, or insist they're better as friends. But underneath, it's not about preference. It's about survival. They're trying to dodge the storm of old pain that love inevitably stirs up. Now, here's the paradox. The very thing they run from is the very thing that could heal them. Because it's only through love, through allowing themselves to be seen and accepted, that those old wounds can finally be rewritten. But the brain doesn't know that yet. It only knows what it has experienced before, and so it defaults to safety. Safety in distance, safety in detachment. Safety in keeping relationships within the bounds of friendship. But let's be honest, safety is never the same as fulfillment. Avoidants may avoid the pain of rejection, but in doing so, they also avoid the joy of real intimacy. They avoid being hurt, but they also avoid being deeply loved. 4. That's the hidden cost. And it's not just their cost. It ripples into the lives of the people who try to love them, leaving partners confused, frustrated, 4. And starved of the closeness they crave. And here's where this goes beyond avoidance. Because if we're honest, we all do this in our own way. 4. Every one of us carries old patterns, old wounds that flare when love gets too close. We all have moments where friendship feels easier, where distance feels safer, 4. Where avoiding depth feels like self-protection. Avoidants simply live at the extreme end of a pattern that, to some degree, exists in all of us. 4. So the question isn't just why avoidants offer friendship instead of love. The question is, how often do we do the same? How often do we hold back? Not because we don't want more, but because we're afraid of the wounds that intimacy might reopen. That's the challenge love presents. 4. It doesn't just connect us to another, it forces us to confront ourselves. And that's the invitation. To stop running from the old stories. 4. To stop letting fear of pain dictate the terms of our relationships. To recognize that love will always stir something deep, and that's not a signal to retreat, 4. But a signal to lean in. Because love will awaken your wounds. But if you stay, if you allow yourself to move through the fear, it will also awaken your healing.